Step number 2, how do bank loans actually work? This is the next piece of the puzzle we have to think through. Fed, Bank A, Bank B, the same characters. This time, no more Home Depot. We've got the average Joe and the average Jane. Let's say Joe is buying something from Jane, maybe a car. We'll say that car costs $100, but Joe doesn't have the $100 right now. Well, he might have 100 Fugazis. And what I call it is it's just like Fugazi, just like Matthew McConaughey in that movie, Wolf of Wall Street. Editor, go ahead and throw up a clip so the viewer understands what I'm talking about.
It's all a Fugazi. You know what a Fugazi is?
No, Fugazi. It's a fake.
Yeah, Fugazi. It's a wazi, it's a woozy, it's a fairy dust. It doesn't exist. It's never landed. It is no matter. It's not on the elemental chart. It's not real.
Right? All right.
Right.
Well, he might have 100 Fugazis in his account, but he's got to pay rent, he's got to buy food, so he needs an extra 100 Fugazis, an extra 100 IOUs from the bank. So he goes down to the bank, asks for the loan, and he gets it. How does this affect the balance sheets? What goes on here? Bank A started with $100 in bank reserves and $100 in IOUs to Joe. After the loan was done, Joe now has $200 in IOUs from the bank, $100 that he had originally, and 100 extra dollars, or Fugazis in this case, that he got as a result of the loan. But the bank now has a loan for $100 on its balance sheet. That's an asset of the bank. So the balance sheet now has $200 in assets, $200 in liabilities. But Joe is buying the car from Jane. So 100 IOUs go from Joe's account over to Jane's. So now her account has 200 IOUs in it from Bank B. And remember what we had to do in step number 1, we had to transfer over the assets. So the bank reserves and the Fugazis, $100 to pay for the car, goes from Bank A over to Bank B. So Bank B's balance sheet now has 200 in bank reserves, 200 in IOUs to Jane. And now Bank A's balance sheet only has the $100 in loans and the $100 in IOUs, the original IOUs to Joe. Additionally, Joe has that loan as a liability on his balance sheet, an asset of the bank, liability of Joe. So let's walk through this one more time, then we'll take a look at what it does on the Fed's balance sheet. Joe starts off with $100 in IOUs that his bank owes him. The bank has $100 in bank reserves, but Joe gets a loan for $100 to buy a car from Jane. So when he gets the loan, Bank A creates an extra 100 Fugazis, poof, out of thin air. They create money. So Joe has an additional $100 of IOUs, bringing his total to 200. But now the bank has the loan as an additional asset on its balance sheet. The $100 of liabilities, or the $100 of IOUs, goes over to Jane's account to pay for the car. So Bank A transfers the $100 in liabilities, but it also transfers $100 in bank reserves over to Bank B. Remember the liabilities and the assets. At the end, the balance sheet of Bank A only has the loan as an asset and the $100 in IOUs, because all $100 of original bank reserves went over to Bank B. On the Fed's balance sheet, it starts with $100 of bank reserves for Bank A and $100 for Bank B. Those are on the asset side of the commercial bank's balance sheet, liability on the Fed's balance sheet. After the transaction is done, after the loan is created, and then the $100 goes over to Bank B from Bank A for Joe to pay for the car from Jane, the bank reserves get transferred out of Bank A's account to Bank B's account. So when the transaction ends, Bank A has 0 in bank reserves and Bank B has $200 in bank reserves, which makes sense. It matches up with our ending balance sheet here and our ending balance sheet here. You'll notice how many IOUs, liabilities, deposits, fugazis, pixie dust, whatever you want to call them, were in the system to begin with. $100, $100, so $200 total. But when we finished, we had $300, $100 here, and $200 here. This is why we always say the commercial banking system in a normal economy creates additional money supply. Because they generate these loans, the loans themselves create more deposits, more bank liabilities, or what most people would define as more money supply, more M2, more broad money in the real economy chasing goods and services. For the next segment in this 7-part series, the last segment or the entire playlist, check out these links that are probably all around me, and I will see you on the next video.